Mike Buoniauto, a very, very warm welcome to Thank You. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
I know it's my absolute pleasure. Let's dive straight in. You're an author now, and this podcast is all about how content creators can create content. And I am really interested in not necessarily becoming an author myself, but just in getting that message across to people about how to do it, because I feel like it's one of the final things that people look at and go, "Oh no, that's an elite level, right?" You can go and create a YouTube video or
Sure.
a podcast, obviously. So I guess why write a book? How did you get started?
Okay. Well, I guess I've always been a journalist by trade. That's where I started
Okay,
in radio and print journalism. And when I successfully exited the business at the start of last year, I found myself with notes and notes and notes of this book or podcast or something that I wanted to create that distilled kind of all the lessons that I picked up along the way, and not just how to start, scale, and sell a business, but also how to do it without wounding your well-being. Because
yeah,
as I write about in the book, there was a point in which probably about 4 years ago now, where the pressures of being a solo founder and running a business were beginning to get too much and to a point in which it became far too much that it threatened, um, you know, at times, or at one particular time, my life, or I
yeah,
put myself in a very dangerous situation. And so, from talking and working with other founders, solo founders, joint founders, and also CEOs of multinational corporations, when people get honest about the pressures of success and how we put those pressures on our own shoulders and how that's projected from our childhood into adulthood and what that all means, I think that there was just a ton of which I couldn't find out there in the world. And I've always approached my work in that way. That's why I started the
mm,
company. I couldn't see anything like Shape History out in the world that was working towards social impact, but blending advertising and marketing to do that and
yeah,
changing people's behavior using the tactics that make you pick up a Coke can or a Pepsi that instead make you do something as a positive impact on the world. So I thought, I've always approached life that way.
okay,
Tell stories and create products that don't exist already that aim to help people, and then through a process of inevitability, hopefully it will turn into a career, and it has so
no,
far.
good. It's funny that I don't go on Twitter that much these days, but I was chatting to a fella on a previous guest actually, and
Yeah,
he tweeted something about. I get we're getting deep a bit now. I mean, maybe we need trigger warnings and stuff in this, but
no, it's
he
fine.
he he tweeted something about how he almost ended it a few years ago because of the pressures of entrepreneurship and what he was trying to do. You know, raise money, make money for his family, and the rest of it, and how hard it was. And I replied to him and I said, I said that's a powerful tweet, man. Like, not many people talk about this side of entrepreneurship and starting businesses, and I I don't know. It's a really it's an interesting topic that you write about then, right? Because I think it's a story that needs to be told. Is a short version of what I was trying to say.
Completely, and it's a story that people don't like saying. I don't even like talking about what happened to me because it's so personal, and we're taught from such a young age to shut down
Mm,
about this kind of thing.
yeah,
But you can't create something that tries to help other people if you can't tell your honest truth yourself, because that's
yeah,
what gives it relevance. And with regard to that, with that tweet, and I meet so many founders and business leaders now that across all ages, demographics, that are burning out to an extent that it becomes too much and don't want to talk about it. But then we sensationalize it or we ignore it. So we see it every time in the press. It's sort of gambling or fast food, it's drink or drugs, and that
mm,
hits the press, and we don't see it as self destruction. But equally, it's traditionally celebrated behavior such as serial entrepreneurship, starting companies again and again, cumulative risk taking, and
yeah,
persistent workaholism. It's all these things that we as a society see as a socially acceptable way of pushing our limits,
yeah.
and pushing your limits is a is a great thing to do. Get outside your comfort zone, push your limits, do things that you are scared of, but you can't do that every single day, and you cannot scale a company to the levels of which you can then hire other people with doing just that.
No.
You need a ton of other skills.
Just so, what was the business you exited?
Yeah, it's called Shape History. It's a social impact communications agency. So it works with good
Okay.
causes or organizations like the UN or WHO to further behavior
Yeah.
change that generates positive impact around the sustainable development goals. So
Okay.
it's a team of probably about now 50, 55 people in the
Oh
heart
yeah.
of
Cool.
London. And we also work, well, it works fairly internationally. So the team are always here, there, and everywhere. Um, and they're a great bunch. They're a wonderful bunch, and I've been very gracious and fortunate to hire, lucky, and especially with the senior team, hire a really wonderful senior leadership team that enabled us
Okay.
to eventually go through the exit.
Out of curiosity, because I don't speak to many people who've exited on this podcast, business. It's an interesting thread to go down. Why did you exit? If you're happy to talk about it.
Ton of reasons. And there's always not one reason, and as I write that in the book, it's got to be something that is both for the benefit of the company, but also it's a deeply personal experience. And so much about scaling a company, in my
Mm,
eyes, is about doing for others, creating an opportunity for others in that space. And
yeah.
you listen to your team and, all right, you want to go and start working on this type of work, or you want to start doing this type of thing. You want to scale your career in this way. And it's my job as
Yeah.
your boss to create the opportunities for you to do that. That's how I think you effectively scale outwards as well as upwards a company. So the opportunity for the existing membership, the existing management and leadership of the company to take more ownership of the business and go through a management buyout was an
Yeah.
opportunity to to keep going what we'd already started. And I don't think founders should stay in businesses forever and like rust onto their responsibilities. It's your responsibility to keep autonomizing your role so that other people are doing it. And then at the point at which, there's no one else, there's nothing else to do apart from your directorial responsibilities, signing on to HMRC and overseeing the, direction of the business from a, what's the compass of the business? Where's it pointing?
Yeah.
When you've got everyone doing that around you and it's working autonomously, then the next step is to step back and there's other stuff to do. And also, there's a degree of financial freedom that comes with an exit that allowed anyone to then go, right, I've dedicated a decade of my life to growing this thing.
Yeah.
Potentially, as we see with founders, there's 20% of them that makes them super successful at this one thing. And so a whole decade of their life is just spent focusing and celebrating 20% of themselves. 80% of themselves that doesn't bring them money is just
Yeah.
disregarded or forgotten. And that's where the balance of us as human beings, and what inevitably led to my burnout, I was just completely degrading to 80% of myself,
Yeah.
because it didn't make me money. And that wasn't, or not just make me money, but further the business, and
Yeah.
that was something that I wanted to focus on and have since with like a book.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, we'll move on to. But do you have any involvement with the company still, or are you completely out now?
Yeah. No, I really believe in their mission. So I'm still on the board. I'm still invested partially, and I love the. I mean, we're continuing the direction, but it's just getting more and more exciting as every year goes
Right.
by. And they did a tremendous job, as many communications agencies suffered over the pandemic. The agency did really, really well throughout the pandemic, and they made some really smart choices, which
Yeah.
you know I'm really bought into the vision of where they're going next.
Okay. So let's move on to the book.
Sure.
So I guess with books, it's I. So the next question is about ideation and brainstorming, and I guess with books it's a little bit different because I and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that concept is a little bit more drawn out than just chucking up a quick YouTube video or doing a podcast or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious how you went from being, oh, do you know what, I'm going to write a book, to then actually fleshing it out to be what that book's about, because it's a little bit longer than just a blog post, for example.
Yeah, it's quite a bit longer. Actually, I was really surprised when the first copies arrived from the publisher and it was this thick, because I
Wow.
swore I didn't write that much. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's 40,000 words. And I was like, oh, wow, that's a proper book. I didn't realize. I thought it was going to come like a pamphlet. Um,
Yeah.
I think, what's the best way to achieve what you want to achieve? And the best way to get founders to think about their mental health in the framework of how do I optimize my performance, the performance of my business, and not just talk about fluffy stuff, but actually how does it impact what I'm looking to do to succeed? One of the best ways to do that is to publish a book. the other
Yeah.
good ways is to go on podcasts like this.
Yeah.
There's loads of tactics, right? And it's the same as when you work in advertising. What's your tactics?
Yeah.
The book is a tactic to achieve a certain goal, which is just genuinely to help other people. It's also connected me with a ton of founders that are awesome. And I would love to, as I have done already, start investing in other founders similar to my own personal journey. Back in 2015, I found angel investment to start my company. I'd love to
Yeah.
do for others what was done for me effectively. So it's a great way of meeting new founders and
Okay.
finding like-minded people and helping people. In terms of writing it, I just went to the coffee shop every day. I had a framework of what probably would have been 50 blog posts,
Right.
and just started writing and wanted to design it in a way that's super quick reference. Maybe it just sits in you.
Yeah.
When's the founder got time to read a book? Probably when they're on the loo. So
Yeah.
just stick it in your toilet, and then when you've got 5 minutes spare, just read one of the lessons. And it's designed as well so you can make notes, so it
Okay.
finds relevance to the person, because it's not going to be relevant for everyone as written. Make
Yeah.
notes and make it relevant to your experience. And just kind of stuck at it. It was probably 3 years all in, but a year of solid like writing and working with the publisher to get it through. Which is, again, it's just a learning experience because I've never published a book before.
Well, so speaking of learning experiences, and many people haven't published books before, how does I'm going a bit off off script a little bit here, but how does
Mm,
that process go from like how did you get a publisher? How does that relationship work? I mean, I've kind of got so many questions. I could probably speak to you for about 4 hours on this, but
yeah,
I guess
I
conscious
mean,
of time, what's the overview?
the overview is you create a basis of what the book is going to be. You create a
Yeah.
basis on what the audience is, why it's going to find relevance, and how you're going to make it palatable to that audience.
Right.
Which is why it's called No Bullshit Ways to Boss It Without Burnout, because boss it, is a word that is often used, which is a little bit toxic. How you're going to boss it, how you're going to fake it till you make it, how you're going to kill it. And it's all these
Hmm.
words that we cover for the truth, which is everyone is struggling in something and we don't want to talk about it, right? So
Yeah.
that was a way of making founder therapy have relevance. And yeah, you just create a pitch, you shop it round. It's the same as when you're trying to find investment for a company, and then you find an agent, the agent finds your publisher eventually, and you work with them to generate a product that they think is viable because they're the experts, but also
Mhm.
you're the expert in your topic of field. So then you have to fight for what you want in the book. They fight for what they want, and then eventually you get probably
You meet in the
uh,
middle.
the best products. But yeah, it's been cool. However much it's been cool watching it, be on shelves in stores. It's more that I'm getting messages from founders or people who are just anyone trying to reach goals in their career, and they're saying how much they're finding relevance or they're
Yeah.
really enjoying it. It's helping them. That's the whole point of it. It doesn't matter how many they sell.
I was going to ask that. There must be some weird amount of pride that comes from having a physical book on your bookshelf or like you've got to hand there that you don't really get with other bits of content creation.
I think it's a little bit invented, but I totally bought into it. I mean, when you first open the box and you get your
Yeah.
author copies, it went up in the office, next to the my
But
favorite books.
that must have given you a buzz, right? More so than if you just wrote a blog post and stuck it on your website or a
Yeah,
thread on Twitter.
it does. But I've learned over time that those buzzes are only the cherry on top.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's nice, but if you just do something, because plenty of people start businesses, write books because it's cool, but
Yep.
being cool isn't sustainable. You have to, yeah. For me, I don't try and get lost too much in that ego or pride. That's one of the lessons in the book, because that
Okay.
sometimes I'm super conscious how that can lead you down a path of uh, doing things on autopilot rather than. Yeah, sorry, I'm really deep when I come to answering these simple
No,
questions.
it's good. I
But
think
hey,
it makes
yeah,
sense
it's a
to
cool
like,
experience. It's nice.
yeah,
I've got
but
a book.
it,
It's on the shelves.
yeah, but it makes sense to heed your own lessons. Otherwise, it's a bit weird, right? You write a book about these lessons that you should pay attention to, and then ignore them yourself. It's like, well, okay,
Yeah,
doesn't
but
really make sense.
it's also a constant reminder. Like these
Yeah,
lessons. I slip up every day on some of these lessons, and it's just a constant like nudging and reminder to make us, as you optimize any kind of performance in business. You're never
yeah,
going to get it right straight away, and you have to turn it into habits.
true. I was going to ask you a question then. So I asked the previous guest this who'd written a book. if someone asks you what you do, like you meet a stranger or someone, what do you say to them? Are you at the point yet where you say, I'm an author?
I have started to say that I've written a book.
Okay.
Yes, I have. I normally just say that I'm an exited founder, dependent on where I'm meeting them.
Yeah.
I've tried as much as possible to not mention work at all when I meet people,
Yeah.
because we're always trained to, what's the most interesting thing about you? Oh, probably your job or what you do for a
Yeah.
living or
Yeah.
what you
Yeah.
create.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's nice to be like, oh, well, I BMX cycled last weekend and I really enjoyed it. I've got really into that. And
Is that a real thing? Did you?
yes, I did. Yeah, yeah,
Did
it
you?
was
That's
cool.
cool.
I've been getting into it. I'm still not brave enough to go as fast as I want, but
Yeah.
we're going around corners. As I write in the book, once I had this really interesting conversation with a former UN Secretary General about mortgages, and I love to go into a networking event and just get real with people, because we're all human
Hmm.
beings. We're all just going through our stuff, right? And I was trying to
Yeah.
get a mortgage at the time, and he was like, "What's going on in your life?" I was like, "I'm trying to get a mortgage." He's like, "Oh well, to get the best rate, blah 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 blah." And like having this amazing conversation about something completely off topic. So yeah, but yeah, I've got to the stage where I probably just say I'm an exited founder if I'm in a networking event. Yeah.
That's a good question, by the way. What's going on in your life as opposed to what do you do? I
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
because everyone, it just disarms people, but also it's really nice to know a bit about. I try to memorize a little bit about what people are doing in their lives, who I'm working with, or who's in the circle
Yeah.
of like client base, that kind of thing. Because at the end of the day, I don't know, it just makes it a bit more fun, doesn't it?
Well, it opens the door to a different answer than, oh, I'm an accountant or I'm a
Yeah.
bin man or whatever, right?
Yeah, I spoke to an accountant actually last week at a networking event, and he was like, "Oh, I found a therapy. I often talk about I do financial therapy for my clients because we start talking about why they make certain financial decisions." And I was like, "Yeah, that's basically it. Like you're working with numbers, but really you're working with people."
Yeah, fair enough. Let's talk about systems and processes. So
Yeah.
you've decided, one has decided they want to write a book. Is it a case of as simple as going to your coffee shop every morning, open up a Google Doc or Word or whatever, and just
Mm.
plodding away?
Oh, difficult question. One I don't get asked very much. So I would probably say like persistence and discipline is probably the key,
Okay.
and just writing. Yeah, I went to the coffee shop every day that I could. Um, they started to know who I was because I would always go to the same spot. Find a place that you really love that's not going to have like a loud coffee machine grinding behind you, or
Yeah.
interruptions. Good power, someone you plug in,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, just whittle through it and write what comes to mind. Write. Don't worry about what you're writing. Just write, because you can always edit it down or work with others to
Yeah.
edit it down. Um, I then had like brainstorming sessions with experts, not just in neuroscience or specialists in HR, but all kinds of people. I had loads of interviews with exited founders or founders of companies that are scaling super quickly, to
Yeah.
trying, many of which didn't even find their way into the book, but many of which did. And
Okay.
I think it was just interesting to see people's different perspectives on how they integrate a sense of well-being or a sense of more optimizing sustainability, so they can reach their goals they're looking to reach, and do so without for long enough. And so they're implementing these tactics of well-being that they don't even call tactics of
Yeah.
well-being. Yeah, in terms of the content, then through to, because I get a sense that's what you want to talk about. So in terms of the content, we worked on the cover. We worked with a designer. Um, Having a bit of a design background myself, I got a bit hands-on with that, but I kind of let them lead because they are the experts in knowing what looks good on a shelf.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and we just slowly worked through probably a process. Um, Once you find the publisher and start working with them and they've accepted it, like it probably takes about 5 to 6 months once they've accepted the manuscript, all the way through the editing process, typesetting, and then
Yeah.
finally through to getting an author copy, which you proof and you say you're happy with. And then we go through further to make sure that everything's set up for distribution.
Okay.
That the distribution, I'd say, if you're a content producer or a author or a prospecting author, the distribution planning is the key to making sure that the book is a success, because the publisher won't do as much as you think they might.
Yeah.
They're not there to push the book as much as you perhaps think.
Yeah.
It's your job as an author to make sure that book resonates, hits shelves, but also you have a firm. I mean, we built a distribution list of about 20,000 emails that we went out to on launch, found who those people were on Instagram and LinkedIn, and put out messages to them on launch day and publish day.
Okay.
And then the key also would be I'd advise finding launch partners. So we've got NatWest, Unrest, which are a great accelerator of startups, Founders Taboo, who do basically this work with founders in retreats. And each of them bring a database of about 20 to 30,000 email addresses. And so
Okay.
launching a book is just a bit, it's like anything that's creative, it's a bit of a numbers game.
Yeah.
And so how many email addresses can you crack up with your own list and with the list of partners
Why?
that
Why?
are,
Why
yeah,
would
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, why would a partner? What's in it for NatWest and Unrest to help
Yeah.
you? I guess with that.
Well, basically, it's added value for their cohorts or their founders that they have in their group. You can't just go out
Okay.
to any old partner. NatWest Business
Yeah.
have a cohort of founders that they want to work with to make sure that they're sustainable. The accelerator is the same. Founders Taboo
Yeah.
is a retreat, so they've got loads of the books available for their founders and entrepreneurs that are going through their journeys. And I've also got them on board with the launch event. So one of them's hosting it in a week's time in London, and we've got about 200 people coming in the room there. That's an opportunity for those guys to network, to find new founders, to find new investors. So it's about creating an ecosystem around your work
Yeah.
so that it's mutually beneficial for everyone involved, but it's also a lot of nagging and what feels like a lot of spamming. I took
So
a picture, someone took a picture of, I think it was like Kim Kardashian holding up like a cleaning product or something, like totally unrelevant, not relevant to her, right? And
yeah.
they said, "This is you all this week," like just me, like plugging a book all day, every day,
Do you know what though?
spamming people's
It's
inboxes.
you've got to do it, haven't you? I mean, this is the
Yeah,
thing. Like, I was talking about my podcast with someone the other day. I said podcasts are really strange in the sense you'll record it, you'll publish it, and you'll put a couple of social posts saying, "Oh, this is out," and hopefully the guest will share it as well because then you get more reach. But then you don't. Then you don't. Most people, myself included, often you don't say anything about it again.
yeah,
And it's like you've got this great body of content that you have to keep hammering. And one really interesting tip I heard was it feels bad to do, but most people won't see your content the first time.
mm,
So you have to keep repeating it. And
yeah,
if they do see it, they'll be like, whatever. They, maybe they didn't see it and they've reminded them, or maybe they'll see it, but they've already seen it, so they just glide on by. And it's a
yeah.
weird one.
I think it's separating out the fact that you see your content every day,
Yes, yeah,
but not many people have. And so if you're repeating yourself online, if you're creating different versions of the same content, just started using TikTok. It's amazing, incredible platform, so much reach. Very, very difficult to pick up a following because people don't want to
yeah.
follow on that platform. But it's
They
an
don't need to,
amazing
do they?
amount
The
of
algorithm's
reach,
so good.
right? It just shows you what you want to see.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, that I've been using TikTok. I've basically been using everything, and it's felt, as I said, you feel a little bit like even though you believe in the product, a little bit like a door-to-door salesman that just keeps nagging
yeah,
people. You bought the book yet? You bought the book yet?
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah, yeah,
if
yeah.
you're not going to do that for your own work, then who is? No one. So
Yeah.
you have to lead by example. But then, I'm not going to do that forever. Giving myself the next couple of weeks doing podcasts like this and other interviews, and then slowly and surely it will seep a little bit back down, and
Yeah.
it might turn into more talking at events, speaking opportunities, curating events with other partners that the book is part of. Like it becomes a bit more gentle after that.
Yeah. I guess I was going to say about the partners actually is quite an interesting angle, but I guess that's quite good validation that actually if the book was no good, NatWest wouldn't be putting their name to it or Unrest or whoever, right? Because
Hopefully.
reputationally, then that impacts them, doesn't it? So it must be quite validating for you that actually they like it and they're prepared to send it out to their lists and their clients.
Yes. I never really thought of it that way, but I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice that they like it. It's a wonderful feeling. They've one of them has bought several a lot of copies
Yeah.
for their cohort, and it's a nice feeling. But yeah, I guess that would be the whole point of designing something fit for purpose. I'm quite
Yeah.
functional, I imagine. And through this conversation, I'm kind of realizing I'm answering questions quite in a functional manner. Like this leads to this, leads to this, and
Yeah.
I try and back out a little bit of the emotion of, oh, isn't it great that they like my work?
Well, no, I mean, but it is good in the sense that it proves that the work's good. Otherwise, they wouldn't have bothered
Yeah,
because
hopefully.
they know it adds value to their customers ultimately.
Yeah, I'm really hoping so, and I believe that's the case.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I mean, there's a ton of people who probably don't like it or don't resonate with it.
yeah.
There's a ton of founders who I spoke to in the process of writing this book, who believe that well-being has no. I spoke to investors who had believed that well-being or a sense of sustainability with their people, their founders they invest in, or the content creators they work with, you know, that's not important. Just works. How much profit you're going to make me at the end of the year, and
Mm.
there's still people who believe that that is the quickest way to build sustainable businesses, and it's just not, in my experience, at all. Because you'll be
I think
what?
sustainable is a key word there, though. I'm not sure that they think from a sustainability perspective because I see it a lot as well.
Yeah, but I'm not just talking about sustainability for the planet. I'm talking sustainability for the people you invest in. Like, if
No,
you
that's what
don't,
I was as well.
yeah, like if I'm going to invest in someone,
Yeah.
and in 5 years they're going to make me, if we just talk profit, so they're going to make me 5 times my investment in 5 years' time,
Yeah.
and then they're going to burn out, and the business is going to sell or close, and I'm going to make a little bit back. Or if I really make sure that that person is coming from a good place, and they're not reaching towards success in an unhealthy way, they're not doing everything themselves, and all the tactics in the book,
Yeah.
then they're gonna run that company for 15 years, and they're gonna make 100 times my investment. Like, it's
Well,
just
this is it.
easy. It's easy maths, right? But
Yeah.
short-termism is something which plagues the industry.
Short-termism is one of my biggest bugbears in life. I hate it. But
Mm,
tell me about when you thought about the book originally. Did you
yep.
have a goal of what you wanted to achieve with it?
I laugh because a lot of people in my family have asked that, and I keep saying I just want it to reach its potential,
Okay.
whatever that may be. Um, I've never I've never written a book before. Used to be a journalist, so I'm used to my work being out there and read, but I had no expectations. I just wanted it to resonate with people. So
Yeah.
no is the answer. I didn't really set myself up for
Do you know?
anything. So I'm
I
pleasantly
think I
surprised.
no. I think that's a healthy way to look at it. I've talked to a few people recently who have gone into a project of some description and have not had a target in mind. And I same with me in this podcast. Weirdly, and I think it's a very healthy way to go about it because as soon as you start introducing the numbers into things, sometimes, I mean, it's a little bit counterintuitive with the next question I'm about to ask you, but
Mm.
once you start introducing numbers, changes the dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, well, the purpose of the book wasn't to make money, and I would say to anyone, if you want to make money, don't publish a book. I mean, do, but
Yeah.
it's not short term money making. A book's
No.
not going to make short term money. If you want to make money, then start a sustainable business and yeah, build it upwards. Or and outwards. So I think, like anything, any kind of content creation, it's very difficult to monetize. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to put a monetary value on the success of the book. It's more about how many people it hit bestseller in 3 different categories: sales, entrepreneurship, and business. Brilliant.
Okay.
That's good enough for me. We've got a sold out launch event next week. Brilliant. Great. If I start comparing myself to, are we rivaling Simon Sinek?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
saw it. I saw it as number 2 on one of the lists next to his book for like a fraction of a second on launch day. I was like, great, screenshotting that before it falls. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's no point comparing yourselves to
No.
the biggest in the business that have huge amounts of marketing spend,
And have been doing it a
because
long time.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
they've got, it's a different beast entirely. But yeah, I don't have any expectations with the book, and I've been pleasantly surprised that it's reached its potential.
Cool. Did you ever look at self-publishing?
I did. Yes. Well, I wanted to work
Okay.
with a publisher that was expert in the field. And so the publisher
Right.
that I worked with eventually was experted in not just business books, but business support books, from a more uh, human perspective. And I thought that
Okay.
they really got it.
Fair enough. The next question is about, it's kind of, and it is counterintuitive based on what we were just talking about a minute ago, but it's about looking at performance. And I'm going to change
Yeah.
the question slightly. Have
Okay.
you, by analyzing what you did in this book and what it's gone on to do, has it A, made you think about writing another book? And B, has it shaped how you would go about doing that as a result?
Okay. I think it's too early to tell whether I would change the way I'm doing it because I'm just
Okay.
running through the process of doing it now.
Are
Um,
you looking at the performance? I know you said like the bestseller list and the rest of it, but
I'm looking at the metrics of how many people are reading the email addresses, how many people are clicking through to sign up to the event, how many people are writing about it online. I'm looking at more percentages rather than numbers. So, how many people
okay,
from this tactic are cutting through and doing this action?
right,
It could be there's 10 people here and there's three of those 10 that are doing that, or it could be there's 10,000 here and there's 30,000, sorry, 3,000
yeah,
doing
yeah,
this
yeah,
action. It's more about that for me.
okay.
Would I write another book? Again, too soon to say. I don't like to rush ahead. Uh, I have
Have
another.
you got an ideas list going somewhere?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I'd love to write a book about um, our obsession to being busy, because one criticism I have of founder therapy is that it's quite specific, even though it isn't
Yeah,
inside. It's quite specific from a marketing perspective to founders and entrepreneurs, but from
yeah,
people who've read it in all different kinds of fields of work who aren't running companies, they've said, "Oh, these lessons are relevant to everyone." And I think it touches
yeah,
a little bit on our why our generation is so obsessed with being busy, and it has a link towards the lack of physical, financial, and emotional security that we have now in life and compared to the previous generation. Sorry, getting a bit deep.
no, no, no.
And I would love to dip into that a bit more because it's
I was,
fascinating to see, how we're all effectively killing ourselves trying to reach the same levels of success that our parents did
yeah,
when the game has completely changed.
I was going to ask about your target market actually.
Yep.
I mean, I know it's called founder therapy. It's weird you said that because I've been thinking about that angle earlier on in the interview. Like, there are lessons I'm sure that that are suitable for founders that would be equally suitable for managers in business or leaders in business, or I guess even just family life, right? I mean, I am a founder of a family to a certain degree. Like,
Yeah.
did you
Nice.
have a view in mind that founders, or is it existing founders or aspiring founders, bit of both? Did you think about that side of things?
Yeah, so definitely existing founders, existing entrepreneurs, and aspiring founders and entrepreneurs
Okay,
were target audience. I would say that I wrestled with the idea of calling it success therapy for a long time. It didn't
right,
roll off the tongue like founder therapy did,
no,
but it could have been that. But it's two different ways of writing, and I
yeah,
think that the secondary market for this book is certainly people who are aspiring in their careers, people who are climbing the career ladder, people who one day would want to start a company but are currently working for. I mean, one of the first chapters is this is the book. This is the book that you wish your boss had read. The book you
okay,
wish your boss had read, right? So it starts off very much like you're either thinking about your past bosses and bad
yeah,
experiences that you've had, or you're
yeah.
currently in that bad experience and you want to either make the situation better for you and those around you, or hand it to your boss and be like, read this, dude, like, please. um I don't know, but it's
You're
something you
making me
wrestle with.
laugh because you're making me laugh because you could have called it parent therapy and just swapped out like just had
Yeah.
this is you want to be the parent that your parents weren't
Right.
or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, man.
How funny. I guess I want to ask you about creating a book. So, I mean, I do go into bookshops occasionally, not as much as I probably should because of uh, the behemoth that we won't talk about online. But
Yeah.
how do you stand out from the crowd, right? When you do go into a bookshop, there are hundreds of books, thousands of books, and every niche is covered. Like, how do you make sure yours stands out from everyone else?
Okay. So I'd say lesson number one, you're not going to pick up all of your audience in bookstores. Predominantly, you're going to pick
Yep.
up your audience online, and you stand
Hmm.
out by having a robust and large distribution list and a smart marketing plan behind the book. Um,
Okay.
you can't sell anything, but anything can sell if it has the right marketing plan behind it. And so,
So, does that mean
not
you thought long and hard about marketing plan before you went down this road?
might be my background because that's the agency I grew, but yes,
Yeah.
it wasn't. You have to make a good product, and it has to um, be well written. It has to be well proofed from experts who know what they're doing. So I
Yeah.
went down, worked with people who really understood that. Um, Obviously, the color is a very topical color for books. Orange, that was kind of decided for me because I looked at the shelves and was like, orange is the color we're going with.
Yeah.
Um, the illustration was something. There's illustrations throughout that kind of bring the lessons to life, and I really like this one about a bird escaping the cage, because one of the lessons is escape the beautiful cage. We build these things that we
Yeah.
think are beautiful, but actually they entrap us. Most of that, that's our job. And so
Hmm.
it really kind of summed up the lessons of the book. But yes, marketing, but not just marketing, a firm distribution list, a firm partner list. It's a numbers game at the end of the day, making sure that you've got as
Yeah.
many different email addresses, many different potential audiences as possible before you start to go out. And what are the phases? The other thing is to think about how your story changes over the course because of the launch, because people get really bored really quick.
Yeah.
So at the start, not that this was entirely manufactured, but it was somewhat thought through. I
Yeah.
say somewhat, very thought through. Um, at the start, you've got, hey, we've just launched a book. Isn't this awesome? Like 3 days to go, sort of thing. Oh, it's just hit shelves, photograph of it on
Yeah.
a shelf. Blah, blah, blah. Then you've got the reviews. So you keep telling that story. Then next you have potentially that we've got a review in the BBC. So we start telling that story. Then you do a bit
Rivaling
of a,
Simon Sinek for the bestseller chart.
yeah, I haven't quite rolled that angle out yet. I might do that this week. But yeah, you
Yeah,
keep
man.
angling it in a different way because you want people to keep being interested in this product
Yeah.
that's not changing. This product is stationary, but the angle
Okay.
in which people find it can pivot and change over time.
Yeah.
And so next week there'll be a ton of content that we get from the launch event. We've got a few special guests and high profile speakers, so that as well be different angles that we keep bringing people back to the same thing. And so,
Nice.
yeah, I think many people, when they think about books or any form of creative expression that turns into a product, they think about it of where it sits. It sits in a cinema. It sits on a shelf.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's just another touch point to find your product. The
Yeah.
real the real energy goes into your working yourself or working with others to build a robust distribution list. And traditionally, creative people don't tend to like to think about the commerciality of their products,
No.
and that's why you have creative people and you have more strategic thinkers that tend to work together to create these things.
So, at what point did you really consciously start trying to build an audience to support this endeavor?
Before the book was even had a name, I think
Okay.
it was like 3 years ago. It was first called Profitable Poisons about 3 years ago, and then it was called The Better Business Book. And throughout that process, it was just growing an audience.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'd encourage people to start as early as you can, because as big as that list can be, maybe the biggest potential for your product there will be.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me about. I'm sure it wasn't a totally rosy experience writing this book.
Yep.
Kind of the struggles, the challenges. Did you ever think to yourself, "No, I've had enough.
Yeah.
Bin it off."
Yeah, I binned it about three times over the course of 3 years.
Did you?
I binned it off a bit because we were exiting the business, and so I couldn't quite take on like writing a book at the same time as doing that. But then through the
Yeah.
process of selling the company, there was a load of lessons I learned, which actually then made the book stronger, because that's
Okay.
an aspiration I hope people want to go for, is potentially exiting their business. And there's a ton of lessons of how you can do that in the book too that I picked up.
Yeah.
Yeah, other than binning it, I'd say when you put out something creative, you probably the same. You want it to have emotional relevance, so you talk a little bit about your own story. And so there's stuff about what
Yep.
happened to me when I burnt out and the destructive stuff that happened, which was difficult to write. But I'd say the biggest thing that I found difficult to write was I wrote chapters and chapters and chapters about my parents, and particularly my father. And because a trend I saw throughout speaking with investors and founders and entrepreneurs was that the experience of their childhood really shaped who they became, and their attitudes towards success and money followed. And
Yep.
so there was a lot in there about my dad, and I ended up taking that out fairly early on in the writing experience, predominantly because I didn't want to publish something that was that personal or potentially that damning to a man I love, my father.
Yeah.
So I decided to show him the chapters that I'd written,
I was going
and
to say that. Did you talk to him about it?
I did, yeah. And it actually, it's hard to remember exactly when, but probably about 2-3 years ago, our relationship completely changed through the process of showing him the chapters, talking about what happened, and actually for me, really, not to get too deep, but for me, really understanding his perspective on. He was in his early 20s, running a very small company, had two, then three kids, supporting the family by himself, first generation immigrant Italian, deaf. There
Mm.
was a lot of things against him and a lot of things propping him up. And I think it gave me the perspective of understanding where he was coming from at the same time. Anyway, blah, 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 how people make up, you learn a little bit of the other person. And so in the book, there is a fraction of that, because it's super important for founders to think about how the experience of their parenting has affected their attitudes towards success and money and commerciality and fame and whatever you're going for.
Yeah.
Normally a sense of validation. But there was a ton of stuff that I just took out because I was like, we've made up now, so I don't want this rant to go in the book. And also it was slightly what's the word, like indulgent. It was
Yeah.
self-indulgent and not really to the betterment of the product I was trying to make. But in turn, it's really nice I write in the acknowledgements, like, it was nice to I think I wrote like, nice to understand the footsteps in which you follow with my dad, because I don't think I did for years.
Do you know what? I don't think any of us do. I think I mentioned earlier, I've got two kids now, and some of the stuff we go through as a family on a day, like every day's a bloody eye opener. I'm like, now that makes sense.
Mm,
Why was my dad angry that day? Oh, I get it, because we were a pain in the ass. Like, and it's just, I mean, it's not even rocket science, but until you kind of been through that process, and have that realization yourself, you're like, now it makes sense.
yeah,
And
it's quite
it's
nice. I think it's quite nice though that so many, particularly fathers, but parents now, are thinking about how they um, just talk about their feelings and emotions, uh,
mm.
so much more than our fathers
Oh
did.
God, mate, it's a different generation, right? It really
Yeah.
is.
So
Cliche
it'll
as it
be
sounds.
interesting. We'll either fuck up a whole generation of children, or they'll be so much more empathetic and better rounded individuals. We'll see. Let's wait 10 years.
I guess the fear is it just goes so far the other way, and it's like, just, you never find a middle ground. I don't know,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But
but it's tough.
we
It
can
is
all
tough.
hope. We can all try.
Uh, have you got kids?
I've not. No, not yet.
No, it's tough. It's like you just never know what you're doing is the right thing, and that it is very much like running a business, right? You try something, you think it works, and then the next day it doesn't work, and it's like, oh right, okay.
Mm.
It's
Is it
just
like running a business?
Yeah, I think so. Like it's just
Because
yeah, a
I've
bit
caught
business that's constantly on fire.
because I've caught myself once or twice saying to my family, they were like, "What are you going to do next?" I was like, "I'm either going to start another business or I'm going to start a family." And they were like, "It's not the same." And I was like, well, it kind of is.
It
Like,
kind of is. I think
you've
it
got all
is.
this energy and time, and you want to give it to something to
Yeah.
help it grow. And yeah, starting a family is definitely something that I would love to do with my partner, and
Yeah.
eventually we'll find ourselves in the place where we are ready. But yeah, it's funny how people say having kids is like running a business.
I think it is. It's a weird question. Do you think writing this book has made you a better person?
Um, yeah, I think the lessons in the book have made me a better person. Writing them down has probably helped me remember them a lot more. Uh,
Were you aware of these lessons before you sort of sat down and thought about it to write them down?
um, I was a yes. Throughout the course of scaling the company, as I write in the book, like running a company feels a little bit like therapy, and if you don't get ahead of it, it will kind of get ahead of you, and
Mm,
you'll start when you run a company, you start to see that you role model behavior, and so the very best of your behavior starts to get mirrored back at you, and that's
yeah.
a really lovely experience. But also, the more problematic elements of your personality start to also get reflected back at you because you set the culture,
Yeah.
and that can be a really disconcerting experience. And so throughout the process of that, that made me hopefully a much better person because I started to see things that I didn't like in the very, very early
Yeah.
years of the startup. And so that made me reconsider how I was approaching elements of trusting others, and how I was approaching the sense of the commerciality of the business, and my approach to finances. Yeah, all of which came from lessons I'd learned in my childhood, and also probably not growing up, sorry, working amongst an advertising industry which is really, really hard nosed, really
Yeah.
commercial, and I think I picked up some really nasty habits.
Mm. Well, I think we all do, but that's why I was asking, because it's kind of like you're self-aware enough to go, okay, I've learned that, and now you're writing it down to share with others, which I think is really quite cool. So
Thanks, man.
kudos. I'm going to change the time frame of this next question. It's about excuse me, shadowing an author, and I'll do it as a two-parter. If you could shadow any author for a day now, who would it be?
Mm,
And if you could have shadowed any author for a day, say, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, maybe it's the same person, I don't know, but and I guess I'm just trying to work out whether or not that has changed now that you've written a book as opposed to writing a book. Like, is there someone you would have wanted to learn from, in the first instance?
yeah.
And then obviously now you've written one and you've seen kind of behind the curtain, as it were. Is there someone, and like I said, it might be the same person. I don't know.
I don't know if my perception has changed on who I'd want to shadow. I've always wanted and looked up to. There's a bloke called Johan Hari, and he wrote a book
Yeah.
called Lost Connections.
Yeah.
And I've always loved like documentaries on normally Channel 4. Netflix does it a bit now, where you think you're tuning in to watch something and then you really watch something else. So I remember a documentary about, and this will make a point. I remember a documentary about dog grooming on Channel
Okay.
4. And what you really got when you watched it was a beautiful documentary about the aspect of loneliness and the aspects of mental health. And because it was focusing on this one individual who turned to dog grooming to kind of ignore her problems, or solve many of her problems around loneliness and social interaction. It
Yeah.
was beautiful. And I think Johan Hari does that really well with Lost Connections. Like, you think you're tuning in to, like, read a book about our connections to the world, or our troubles with addiction and things like that. But
Yeah.
really, what he teaches you is like the way that we treat mental health in the world, but predominantly in the West, is fucked up.
Hmm.
And whilst it's maybe one half of the solution to medicate, the other half is there is these 7, 8 lessons you can learn, that we've lost these connections with the world, or not just the world, but with each other, and the way that technology divides us. Like, it's really, really fascinating. And so
Yeah.
I love people who do that, and I love his books. I think they're awesome. So I'd love to shadow him. Um,
He
yeah,
is he is a very, very interesting guy. I've heard him on a lot of podcasts, and the thing is with some podcast guests, you hear them chat once and they kind of say the same spiel every time, and it
yeah,
turns into. But I don't think I've ever listened to him on a podcast and thought I've heard that before, or I don't know. He's just his breadth of knowledge and the way he communicates things, like you say, like complex issues into things that an idiot like me could understand. It's just, yeah, he's a talented guy.
Yeah, he's brilliant. The other one is, do you know Mark Mason, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant book. I'd love to. He's just had his work turned into a Netflix series, which is super smart. I'd love to chat to him for a day. Yeah, just kind of deep thinkers, but trying to turn their deep thinking into something that people can understand. So it's not like a textbook.
Yeah, yeah.
What about you?
I what author?
Yeah,
Um, I tell you who I really like at the moment. Did you know Austin Kleon?
I don't know.
So he writes a lot about content creation and a lot about things to do, but he does it in a way that they're very graphic heavy books. They're very easy to read. I think you said something earlier in the interview. I can't remember if it was before we were recording or not. Who's got time to really get? And it's a sad state of affairs, and that's a different conversation in itself. But I haven't got all the time I really like. I love reading, I really do, but I just haven't got the time to delve into all the books that I want to read. I've got excuse me, I've got loads upstairs on my bedside table that are on my list. This is an ever growing pile of like books I want to read, but I'm kind of weirdly I'm trying to stay a bit more fiction focused at the moment,
Nice.
and that's a conscious decision. I've got, I mean, you may have seen from previous episodes, like I have got hundreds of non-fiction business books, marketing, content, psychology,
Mm,
all sorts. And I weirdly, and from a therapy perspective for me, I was in my business all day, and then I was coming home, and then I'd be like, go to bed. I'd be like, read a book about, marketing this or
yeah,
how to convert this. And I was just like, oh my god, I'm driving myself crazy here. And I made a
yeah,
conscious decision, like I'm just going to stick to fiction for a bit. So
yeah. It's an
I've
opportunity to
been,
switch off.
yeah, man, I've been on a fiction trip lately, but
Nice.
yeah. It's a shame, right? I mean, maybe just put it this: reading. I love reading. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming you do as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Journalist and
More audiobooks because I
are
like
you?
driving and listening. Yeah,
Yeah. See, I'm a podcast. I very rarely listen to radio anymore. But it's kind of a shame that we've gone out of this. And I'm making mass generalizations about society, but
yeah.
I don't know. Looking at my own stuff, I don't read as much as I'd like to. We're going on holiday, actually. Funnily enough, in the next week, and I think I'm going to get your book to read while I'm on my sun lounger. I think
Cheers. Oh
it's
well,
kind.
I
I
mean,
think
it might not help you switch off, but
no, it might, but it's actually now. I mean, I've been following your journey anyway, but now talking to you, I'm thinking actually maybe this is kind of some realizations I need to know about my own journey. So it might be quite
yeah.
handy.
I did the same with there was a great book by, and thank you by the way. I did a great I did an audiobook with Ruby Wax. She writes some really wonderful books about mental health and how you and more about kind of like sort of focusing and optimizing your consciousness to get what you
Yeah,
want in a way that's healthy, which is very much in line with what I've written. And I went away on holiday a couple of years ago and just binged her books by the pool, just listening, and it was brilliant. I feel like holidays are a great way to go and do a little bit of self improvement at the same time as doing some relaxing. As long as it doesn't stress you out, like they're a good chance to like think about. They're like save points in a Crash
yeah.
Bandicoot game. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
In Crash
yeah, I
Bandicoot, you
do
get to that
because
save point, and then you think, right, which way do I
yeah,
want to go next?
yeah, because when you're at home, there's always something to do, right? You know, there's always jobs to do. There's always and it's kind of weird. You sort of feel into this guilt of relaxing during the. I know maybe this is just me. I mean, this probably turns into a therapy session now, but you don't get that chance to read during the day sometimes. You
Yeah,
know, especially I'm not commuting anymore either, so it's not even like I can sit on the train for half an hour or whatever. Whereas on holiday, you know, if the kids are happy and they're in kids clubs or they're having a rest in the pool or whatever, you can sit on your lounger and actually just say, "Do you know what, I'm going to read for half an hour," and
for sure.
there's no guilt attached to it, which is, even though I'm saying that, it sounds really weird, but I don't know.
No, it doesn't sound weird. I think
No,
as
I mean, it
when
sounds
you
weird that
respond,
there's guilt to attached to reading at home during the day.
Yeah, but then I mean, you're responsible for the lives, keeping little ones alive and the betterment. You know, you're thinking about so much more than just yourself in that
Yeah.
instance. So when you get a moment, as we all do, hopefully on a vacation holiday, then you can start to think about, all right, where do I want to go? How old are your kids?
5 and 3.
Oh yeah, so you're in
Yeah.
the years.
Yeah, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What's their names? Or you
Holly,
might not
Holly
be
and
able to put it on
Isabella.
here.
Nice.
Holly and Israel, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Hats off to you, man, for running a business, having two kids under the age of 6.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that about the similarities. Like I think it's another thing that doesn't get talked about much, but running a business as a parent is incredibly difficult. It's really, really challenging, and I think I don't have many regrets in life, but one of the things I think about from a similar position is where would I be if I'd started my business pre-kids?
Mm.
And you can, but then I don't know, maybe you burn out in a different way, right? Because you haven't got that thing to pull you back to your safe point. Because otherwise, you're just like, well, you're working till midnight, 1 in the morning every day
Perhaps,
because you haven't got that thing to pull you back into normality. I don't know.
yeah. I think that, and again, I'm generalizing, but when I've worked with founders that have got kids, there is a wonderful sense of like, there's also there's things that are obviously that get in the way or are slightly negative that heat their feelings of mental health or well-being towards their work, but
Yeah,
also there's this trend with folks that have kids where they're like, they really understand why they're doing it,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
they're not, obviously, hopefully they've chosen to start a business that they believe in, that ticks the boxes for them if they want to be creative or whatever. But that's the work. But like, why they're doing it? Well, obviously we're trying to build emotional, physical, financial security for our families, and that sense of
yes,
why
the
just
purpose.
comes across really, really strongly. And so, yeah, I think there's so many founders I've met who talk about their teams going on maternity or paternity leave and like worrying about it. And I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe, but also, if and when they come back, they're going to have a great sense of balance, a great sense of purpose,
Yeah,
and you'll know if they stay with the business that they're there because they genuinely want to further it because it's helping them. You know, it's got to be a two-way street. It can't
yeah.
just be, and that's with everyone. I'm going a bit off topic, but yeah. Um,
No, 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 get it. Okay, let's move on. Got 2 questions left for you, Mike. If someone came up to you and said they wanted to write a book, what would you tell them?
don't do it. No, I'm kidding. I would say why,
Yeah,
because it's a tactic, not a goal. It's
yeah,
there to achieve something, and in this instance, I wanted to help people. It's not there to make tons of money. It's not there to launch another business. Plenty of people do write
yeah.
business books to launch businesses, and that's fine. But I just genuinely want to help people. So I'd ask why,
Okay,
and I'd probably tell them to plot out. One of the tactics I found really useful is using sticky notes, and I would write all of the different chapters and the nuggets of the chapters, and then every piece of research or interview with a scientist we had was on a different color sticky note. And
okay.
in the room next door in the office, we had all on the wall. I took over all wall, and you can move stuff around with sticky notes, which makes it really, really easy to
Yeah.
figure out the order of play before your pen even starts or your fingers start typing.
It's funny, isn't it? Like all the tech that's available to us all day, every day, sticky notes still seem to win out.
It
I'm the
just
same. I
works.
love a post-it. Yeah,
I love the idea as well that it's physically taking up space in your home,
yeah,
because that's also an incentive to get that shit done. Like, because you don't want a
yeah,
whole wall forever taken up with this idea. You want to get it off the wall and onto the page.
yeah. No, I agree. Good tips. If we spoke again in 12 months' time and you said to me, do you know what, Chris, it's been a really successful year for me, what would have happened?
I would have taken this
You'd have knocked Simon Sinek off #1 for a start, I guess.
perhaps. I may not answer this question how you think I'm going to answer, actually. A
Okay,
successful year for me would actually be doing a little less.
okay,
And predominantly because since exiting the business, I feel like I've jumped from contract to contract. I've been working with organizations like Virgin Startup as their entrepreneur in residence, and other accelerators. And then I've been working on the book. Like, I've not stopped. And a big part of an exit for me was that I wanted some time to really stop. Like, you're talking about going on
Yeah,
holiday
yeah.
and just, where's my save point? And I don't think I've done that. So to be a little bit self-indulgent about it, it's not about what I do next. It's just about just taking a little bit of time to be in that nowhere place. And so if you did speak to me in 12 months' time, I'd probably have another product. I've got a film I want to make, because I made a film about 10 years ago. It was a great experience. I've got another business that I'd like to start. Uh, but in
Sounds like you
time,
need a long holiday somewhere just to sort
yeah,
of to get yourself back to point zero.
exactly, man.
Have you got plans to go away anywhere?
I do, yeah. And my family are from Rome and Naples, so every
Oh,
summer we get a chance to go back down there, down to Positano, to the coast, which is beautiful.
nice.
So I'll be scooting round in a Fiat 500 in a couple of weeks, around some very hairpin, dangerous roads thankfully I know quite well now.
Beautiful. Rome is one of my most favorite places in the world. I just love it.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? If you get a chance, just keep going south because it just gets more and more beautiful as you go down.
Does it?
Mm.
Well, next time we're over, I will definitely hit you up for some tips. Mike, thank you so much for joining me on 10Q. I am not joking. I am going to buy your book and I am going to try and read it on my Sun Lounger, kids permitting. If what you've talked about resonates with the listeners and viewers of 10Q, where can they come and sort of say hi? Where's the best place? And
Yeah,
I'll link to it in the show notes and stuff.
best way to do it is in the show notes in the links, but also just Google founder therapy,
Okay.
Mike, and you'll probably come across the website. And there's a TED talk. There's a few different things. But yeah, if the best way to reach me is to get in contact. So if it resonates with you, then just drop me an email.
On email, any social media platform you're
Oh
particularly
yeah.
involved in?
Well, I've spoke about my love for TikTok recently, but probably the best ones are the ones I'm most active on are Instagram and LinkedIn.
Okay. I will share all those below. Mike, thank you
So
so much for your time today.
thanks, Chris. I really appreciate your time as always.